Hi, and welcome to Muncie's VideoChat 4 for the musical theater class. Notice on your syllabus that there is a different due date this week. I need to have some indication of your ideas about your final paper. So it is August 3rd. Your topic ideas are due. I'll put details about that into the resources folder under week 4, and it will also be in assignments 2. I will attach some points to it, so I'll try to help you get that done. You need to be starting to think about those papers. They can be anything that you're interested in. It could be about shows that are done by a specific creative team like Rodgers and Hammerstein. It could be a look at different, at a specific genre in musical theater, such as reviews or rock musicals or concept musicals or blockbuster musicals. You could look at like choreography or songs or orchestrations. It's really up to what you're interested in. There's so much to choose from, so you need to write about what interests you. You need to do more research on your topic than just watching movies, although you will need to watch a few more movies than what the core viewing is going to give you. You can go to Google and Google musical theater, and it's amazing all the stuff you'll find. You can find musical histories, you can find different theater reviews, so there's a lot of things you can do online. You don't have to have access to a huge library of musical theater anthologies. Also, creators often have their own websites. For example, Andrew Lloyd Webber has a website called reallyuseful.com. And again, if you just Google his name, you'll find it. And on that, he goes into depth about all of the shows he's done. So you're going to find a lot of material out there to work from. So Unit 4 is dealing with the 1960s and the 1970s. Remember, in 1956, My Fair Lady's success was tremendous, and it ushered in an era of adaptations of literary characters and historical personages. So you're going to see a lot of that happening in the 60s and 70s. Also, musicals were bigger and they cost a lot more, and it took longer for the investors' dollars to be recouped. So blockbuster musicals became the goal. Socially, there's so much going on in the 1960s, and except for a few isolated cases, most Broadway shows did not really reflect the unrest and change of this decade. Also, there were slow changes in Broadway of trying to keep up with the new pop-type music and the dance crazes. You remember that when ragtime was out there and the varsity drag and some of the other dances and musical styles, Broadway was quick to pick up on those. Well, that didn't happen in the 1960s. It didn't happen actually until the very last part of the decade with Hair in 1968, when it became the first rock musical. So these decades also saw a lot of experimentation in theatrical styles. In particular, we're going to be introduced to the concept musical by producer and director Harold Prince. And the first show that's really been dubbed a concept musical is Cabaret. The show's theme in a concept musical is made manifest in a physical or a theatrical way. The theme transcends the plot. The plot is often loose, and you're going to be seeing this happening in Cabaret, in Company. Fiddler on the Roof is actually considered a concept musical. Chicago, which you'll be watching. So be on the lookout for a difference in how the plot is integrated now into the show. So one of the shows the book talks about is Company, and that's a show that Harold Prince produced and Stephen Sondheim wrote the lyrics and music for. In this particular show, which is a concept musical, Stephen Sondheim also introduced to the musical theater world the concept of subtext in his lyrics. Subtext is when an actor is saying something but maybe meaning something else, or maybe not bearing their soul completely to the audience. They're holding things back. This type of acting technique is more modern, but it wasn't used in musicals at all until Sondheim's lyrics in Company. So he set a new precedent and moved musical theater into a new era with subtext. During these 2 decades, Sondheim will cement his reputation as a risk-taker in the show called Sweeney Todd. So watch for that one. And actually, there's a great movie version of it out that's just been out a few years, starring Johnny Depp. You might enjoy watching that, and Sondheim may be a good paper topic for those of you who are interested in a little bit more realism and things that are a little bit more risk-taking and far out. In the 1970s, the biggest blockbuster was actually its smallest show. A Chorus Line in 1975 went for over 6,000 performances. It was the first show to have a real solid pop rock score. It was a show that was developed in a workshop situation rather than out-of-town tryouts. Very little scenery, hardly any costumes, but it made megabucks, and it also won a Pulitzer Prize. So Chorus Line is very interesting to read about. In the 60s also, Broadway suffered a loss of audience numbers due to the degraded conditions of Times Square, and you'll read about that in your book. But campaigns were launched to try to clean up Times Square, including the I Heart New York type logos that you see everywhere. Just different, trying to get people back there so that the bad reputation that it had, the seedy reputation that it had, could be overcome. And also at this time in the 70s, different family-oriented shows opened on Broadway also to try to attract a more family-oriented audience. So Annie was one of those, The Wiz, and there are others. You will be watching two very different shows this week. Fiddler on the Roof, which was the early 70s, is a show that has very universal themes that have come out of a very specific time and a very specific place and a very specific people. No one expected it to be such a huge international hit that touched people of many different races. Notice the opening number Tradition as it introduces the entire village to the viewer. And also notice how choreography is used in this particular production. And then you'll be watching Chicago, which was created by Kander and Ebb. They also wrote the music and lyrics for Cabaret. And even though Cabaret was earlier and broke more ground, really, for musical theater, I picked this viewing mainly because the 2002 movie version is so good. You have wonderful performances by Renee Zellweger, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and Queen Latifah and Richard Gere. And it's the first movie musical to win the Oscar for Best Movie since Oliver did in the 1960s. So it was really quite well received. Also, it is a concept musical, so it'll be a viewing of that particular form for you. There's a lot of vaudeville type song and dance numbers in it, so notice those. Okay, keep working, keep submitting, and I'll talk to you later.